Question number 2 from Zhou. Can you gentlemen elaborate on the destruction of old-fashioned concepts like honor, duty, excellence, beauty, valor, etc., and if there is direct evidence of intentional destruction of these concepts? Or was it more an accidental, unhappy byproduct of postmodern deconstruction? Thank you.
These are all masculine virtues, including beauty. Look where female beauty standards got us. And there are also commons in that the entire group benefits from them as standards. They have been undermined and replaced with pathological individualism because individualism cannot stand against organized parasitism and managed decline. And Gabriel also left us an answer. Modernization, industrialization, and urbanization produce systems in place that shelter people from adverse conditions and conflict, rendering these virtues necessary and even dangerous to the interests of current authoritarian financial and administrative ruling class. These virtues, being necessary for survival in pre-industrial civilization, are lionizations of male instincts to perform for his and his clan's interests. These instincts and drives are still very much alive in males, but given most men have little to no outlets for expressing them pro-socially, they find them in simulated conflict like video games and sport, or in the antisocial and gangs.
I think these are great answers. So I'm going to just amplify what Martin and Gabriel said. Honor, duty, in order to, basically it's responsibility. So men gain status through responsibility, always do everywhere. The Europeans are higher trust, so we can increase the scope of our responsibility broader and more easily than other civilizations. So honor, so if we look at all those things that those virtues are, is there a demand that we contribute to the commons by sacrifice for the good of all? And so, like I said, we practice commonsism, not communism, so to speak. And so, if you look at it, it's just the female in the feminine, the feminine intuition is to avoid all responsibility, in particularly responsibility for commons, and especially responsibility for commons that would expose them to cost or risk. So as usual, the crisis of our age is reducible to the introgression of the female intuition by the inclusion of women in the voting pool and the inclusion of the post-war, pre and post-war I have it in my coffee, introgression of Jewish thought, which is feminine, in the Marxist sequence, where Gabriel who brings up postmodernism? It was Gabriel. Postmodernism is the following amplification of cultural Marxism, which was begun by Gramsci, a little dwarf from Italy, and Gramsci, a hunchback. You don't know if he was a dwarf. He was very short, a very short hunchback from Italy. And Gramsci's work was the design. In other words, just to answer the second half of your question, it's not the artificial or accidental byproduct of postmodern deconstruction. Instead, it was an intentional plan to march through the institutions of cultural production. What are the Western institutional? What are the institutions of cultural production? I'm sorry, I'm stuttering. And they are anything that will increase individual responsibility for the private and common by extending that to those who are not only members of the family, but the whole community. This is what effectively military indoctrination in the West does to you. So it's to answer the question, it wasn't an accidental or unhappy byproduct of postmodern deconstruction. It was an intentional effort by the Marxist postmodernists, of whom the postmodernists are just the next generation, and they're French. And just like the woke was the next generation. I mean, it's actually the next generation is feminism, libertarianism, and whatever. But the next generation after that tended to be woke, and what we call woke, which is race Marxism. If you read Gramsci, if you read the cultural Marxists, the Frankfurt School, they did it by design. They knew exactly what they're doing. The reason they came to the USA to do this was because we had a racial conflict, and where the genetics, I'm sorry if you don't like it, are sufficiently diverse that the differences between us cannot be overcome under capitalism or any other rule of law system. And so they promoted this issue in the US by moving the Frankfurt School from Germany to the US to take advantage of the racial differences as the lever by which to undermine the civilization, because they found out relatively quickly that you can't use the class model, class means of leverage, when capitalism is, or rule of law, is what we call it, is rule of law, and what we would call capitalism, I guess, will solve the working class problem. So they've recognized their failure. They went to women, feminism, and race Marxism. And it turns out that given that women don't have this lack of responsibility for anything common, they will side with the disenfranchised party. So what's happened is that just simply by obtaining the vote, controlling most of household spending, getting some legislation through during the 60s when they were young, ignorant, and vulnerable, and allowing massive third world immigration, they were able to achieve through that means, and the second means being occupation of the educational system, and now basic female control of the university system, that we've basically achieved the institution of cultural production, because the women are in charge of, or at least have majority influence over, those institutions that we evolved specifically to produce the high trust, highly responsible civilization. And they're doing everything in their power to undermine the demand for responsibility and hand it over to an authority. In other words, they've married the state. That's the complete answer. Did I do a good enough job there, Francis, Martin?
Yes.
That I think so, although it brings up more question in my mind. So I kept thinking, is modernization and, for lack of better words, commonism, right? The establishment of commons at self-sacrifice. Is this along a spectrum in that you can have more of one or the other, but you cannot have both? And where I'm going with that is I'm thinking, placing this in context of there's a tweet or something by Trump saying, hey, if you're robbing banks, I'm probably butchering it, I can't remember exactly, but he says something along the lines, if you're robbing banks or robbing convenience stores, armed citizens got to be able to put you down. And then I'm tying that to the various trainings that I've had, where under the current legal system, say for example, if someone's robbing a bank where only property is being hurt, and let's say that you as a law-abiding citizen, armed citizen, went out and shot the bank robber, right? Provided the bank robber isn't shooting anyone or hurting innocent lives. They're just damaging property. And then let's say I pull out a gun and I shot him. There is I want to tread very carefully, because I have not seen cases where this has been prosecuted. But there's a chance that you could be prosecuted.
There's one today right now.
Oh, okay.
There's one, not today, but I mean over the past few days, but sure.
So if only property is being damaged and you escalate the lethal confrontation, there is a chance that the armed citizen could be prosecuted by a enterprising, say, prosecuting attorney. So that's contrary to the, as my understanding of the old-fashioned duty, honor, and commitment to the commons. Because what you're doing is upholding the commons, and yet it's being punished under modern law. So then, going back to my original point, if modernity means the Leviathan, modern state providing the safety umbrella and controlling everything, then is
That's
that
not what modernity means, but okay.
okay? Then I probably used the wrong position name for that.
If our current condition is such, which it is, because they've been successful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was not. I read a whole bunch of casework on this. It's within the past 6 months or so, on how common it was to shoot and kill somebody for screwing your wife.
Mm-hmm. And
it used to be relatively commonplace.
Well, it used to be common, but was it prosecuted under the law?
No, you shouldn't have done that. That was a bad thing. Well, I mean, the other aspect of this is the one that which one of you gave pathological individualism. Pathological individualism is just another way of saying anti-commonsism, right? Because the reason we have the commons is pretty obvious. Once you, as an economist, it's pretty obvious. I mean, as a behavioral economist, it's quite obvious. Mm-hmm. And that's that. If you build a society, means family, right? We have family. We tend to talk about society, economy, and polity, right? Well, those are the three factions, but societies is for families. What they're trying to do is this individualism is make society about the individual. But if it's at the individual, we have nothing in common. If it's about the family, we all have interests in common. So any attempt to make it about individuals is an attempt to destroy society. Because the first organization of production and the first thing that gives us common interests is intergenerational production of families, which is the first step in continuation, which we're sort of running into a problem of right now. Then you have economy, which is how you support the families, and then you have polity, which is how you develop commons for the families. Mm-hmm. But individualism is fundamentally, in the sense they mean it, individualism in the sense that they mean it, is essentially attack on the commons. It's attack on the polity. It's attack on the system of organizing people. Because what they're doing is they're saying, instead of investing in the family, investing in society, investing in the economy, investing in the polity, by which all of us benefit, but mostly by all of us decreasing costs. Mm-hmm. We don't have to gate our homes and put bars on the windows and do all this. We don't have to be afraid to have capital or anything else, right? Because why? Because what's the price of that safety? It's huge. It's huge, right? So what they're doing is they're undermining all our systems of cooperation and increasing costs for all of us. Whereas what commonsism does, it decreases costs for us. So it's sort of the opposite it's the mirror image of communism. By practicing commonsism, you decrease prices for everything by people bearing more responsibility. In communism, you decrease liberties, freedoms, choices, and flexibility by depriving people of responsibility and handing it to the state. So it's really clear, the evidence is really clear that you want to do the opposite, because everywhere we get basic ethics, rule of law, and property rights, I mean, people do better. And whatever we try to do the opposite, well, that's easy because you're just reducing it to responsibility. And as I said, most of the work I've done and the work that you guys have contributed is just reducible to the sex differences in responsibility. Mm-hmm. Responsibility and time frame. And so what we're seeing in this century is not a failure of Western civilization. It's a failure of the men to contain the women by putting laws that equally suppress female antisocial behavior, which they perceive by their irresponsibility instinct as a good. And the problem is, which is quite frustrating to me, I'm stuck with, what do we do? I mean, do we cut women? Do we give women their own house so there's at least a negotiation position, but they're still participating? Do we go back to reducing women's participation to women with 2 or more children? Well, that looks like it works, because that women with their own children start to be responsible. Or do we just cut women out of the system altogether? Because we don't have a civilizational problem. We have a women problem. And I don't like it. I don't like saying that, because it's like, please paint a freaking target on my head. I mean, it's bad enough that I have to go say, well, the Semitic group strategy of both Islam and Judaism is colonization by the female method of undermining. Okay, that's bad. Right now, I got to on top of that, I got to come out and say, well, fundamentally, it's female nature, whether it's represented at the individual political or civilizational level of the strategy, that's basically anti-social, anti-political, and devolutionary. I mean, is this a fun message? I mean, I feel like Darwin had it easy telling them people God was dead.
I think it's fun.
Well, Martin, it kind of, I don't enjoy it very much.
I have this argument with my wife all the time. I've been spoon feeding her our work, and she has I guess she's
Your microphone's breaking up again. You've gone silent now.
Yeah, I just lost my microphone for a second then. So she doesn't have to. She borrows me. She will drink it all with while holding her nose, right? And then this is one of the biggest things. She asked me, what can you guys gain by antagonizing women? And my response was, we're not trying to antagonize you. We're just simply pointing out things that wise women throughout the ages that have already known, and we happen to have lost.
Yeah, it's like, who wants to have? We've got enough problem between the sexes because of this whole individualism, feminism, cultural Marxism thing. Okay, great. Cultural Marxism, race Marxism combination. I mean, come on. I mean, we've already got enough conflicts. Now we got to go say, well, unfortunately, ladies, it's genetic and you can't control yourselves. Right? Now, that's not really true. If you can control men's behavior, we can control women's behavior. We absolutely can. It's just we've got to put the laws in place, and the women aren't going to like it any more than men liked having the laws put in place on them and their scoundrelous behavior. So
that throughout the ages, we don't default to our default instincts of raping and pillaging.
Yeah, I mean, because I got to tell you that if you get the chance to do raping and pillaging and make it for profit, it's a pretty rewarding and enjoyable profession. And you don't have to look at history to figure out how pleasant, how enjoyable it is. There's a little bit more risk because some people shoot back, but otherwise, or they spear you back, or arrow you back, or crossbow you back, or whatever. But I mean, raping, pillaging, and looting, and running off with the stuff. I mean, there's a long human tradition of that. That's the same thing I tell people when they talk about how do those guys in Afghanistan do. I'm like, if you get the choice to dirt scratch farm beans, raise poppy seeds raise poppies for heroin, or run around in a truck with a bunch of your in a pickup truck with a bunch of your buddies shooting people and bossing them around, which choice are you going to make? So women unfortunately think that everything they get moves the needle their favor. The problem is they don't get that at some point men are like, this isn't fucking worth it. And then very bad things happen.
Yeah.
Well, that would require understanding how a system evolves over time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in other words, they're not capable of that either.
Yep.
Very frustrating. I really liked the era I grew up in. But we were thought men and women are equal and could be happy together and could live in kumbaya. You know, what happened to the false promise I was given?
Yeah, well, that planted the seed of our current destruction.
Yeah.